Schools are constantly being built. We bring them in, clean them up, and start them on their way to civilization.
We've identified 53 marked or unmarked burial sites and cemeteries for Indian children.
I was gang raped in the school.
More accurately should be called ethnic cleansing.
Foundation of this entire country is built on lives and deaths of Indians.
In 2021, a mass grave of 215 indigenous children was discovered in Canada near a boarding school. To the world, the news was shocking, but for many indigenous people, it was just another cause for frustration. Native American activists had been claiming something like this for years, but were rarely believed outside their own communities. That year, the USA Interior Department conducted a study on these boarding schools in America, and an over 100-page report was released this May. It detailed how these schools worked and was eye-opening, to say the least. Now, before you say my language is too harsh or unfair, the facts and statements I'm about to present to you are straight from this US government report, not from me. Many of us have learned about the decimation of Native Americans in the early days of the USA. Since then, the country has been looking for cheap and safe ways of subduing these populations, providing a safe habitat for the country's white inhabitants while making Native Americans content with less land. How did it achieve that? Education. Between 1819 and 1969, there were over 400 federal Indian boarding schools across America. The way these schools were funded was nothing short of capitalistic genius. The USA encouraged Indian tribes to purchase goods on credit, so they would likely fall into debt, and when they did, they'd have to cede their lands to the government. The proceeds of such concessions would then fund the federal Indian boarding school system. In contrast, money from federal appropriations only accounted for a 20th of total funds. The Supreme Court said it was completely legal. So, what did they teach there?
They all speak English. They are being rapidly brought from their state of comparative savagery and barbarism to one of civilization.
Overall, there were 4 key steps. First, giving Native American children English names. Second, cutting their hair, which Native Americans see as a cultural symbol.
The teaching from my grandfather was, your hair, your long hair is your strength, and your long hair is your wisdom, your knowledge.
It was my first haircut. I cried when I saw my hair on the floor.
Third, banning Native American language, religion, and cultural practices.
They learn not only games and traditions, such as the celebration of St. Valentine's Day, but the mastery of words.
Everybody was required to speak English, which was deemed to be, quote, the language of the greatest, most powerful, and enterprising nationalities beneath the sun. Last but not least, the schools organized Native children into units to perform military drills. Corporal punishment was popular. Solitary confinement, flogging, withholding food, as well as whipping, slapping, and cuffing.
She kept hitting me with the ruler until finally, I guess she got tired. Then she said, no more Indian talk.
There was immediate declaration of war on our culture. It's like our war was prolonged, and the assimilation policies were how they implemented it.
Actually, some Native Americans did see this as a continuation of the US government's war against the natives, since the objectives remained the same: to stop the Native Americans from resisting and make them give up more land. In a sense, these kids were prisoners of war. In the name of education, these students were trained in manual labor, from livestock and poultry raising to cooking and cutting lumber. Hard labor, irrelevant to the industrial US economy. While all this was happening, what the outside world saw were propaganda photos of children's so-called transformation. The model was to kill the Indian in them and save the man, so they'll have greater desires to be in touch with the dominant race.
Kill the Indian, save the man. I mean, come on, that's as genocidal as it gets. The schools were created for one purpose only, and that was to destroy our belief system, to destroy our family system, and to change our identity.
As you can imagine, many parents didn't want to send their kids there, so the government resorted to kidnapping.
They came into the house and took the children and loaded them on boxcars and then wagons and hauled them to the boarding schools.
They chased and captured these kids like wild rabbits. Later, the US government would come up with a more civilized solution. After 1871, Congress enacted laws and authorized the Secretary of Interior to withhold rations to Indian families whose children did not attend schools. Within these boarding schools, physical and sexual abuse, as well as disease and malnourishment, were rampant. And the result was, well, death.
You could die at school and then you're going to be buried out the door.
It's just kind of chilling to me, to think that for so many children, the schools were death traps.
The report identified 53 marked or unmarked burial sites. That number is expected to rise as the investigations continue. Now here comes the final point. The report did not analyze the connection between the federal Indian boarding school system and the present-day experiences of Native Americans. Yet, they are very much connected. Because of this and other historical reasons, Native Americans suffer from high rates of poverty, depression, suicide, and substance abuse. Many are calling this intergenerational trauma. I mean, it's good that the US government is starting to recognize these pains, but it needs to be pointed out that it took a Native American politician literally becoming the head of the Interior Department, the same institution that ran these schools back in the day, and a major news event in Canada to even warrant such an investigation. Before this, some politicians seem to forget Native Americans exist.
We came here and created a blank slate. We birthed a nation from nothing. I mean, there's nothing here. I mean, yes, we have Native Americans, but candidly, that there isn't much Native American culture in American culture.
During election seasons, Native Americans suddenly become politically important for candidates.
These voters have long-standing and justifiable skepticism. Is it hard to get someone to vote when they can point to a treaty that the federal government has actually broken with them?
One of the things I've learned is Indian people are very political.
Many activists say that when voices from their community become politically inconvenient, they're brushed aside. They want more substantial reparations and not to be thought of as some sort of historic relic.